Well, it's not just college students in China who are worried about packing on the pounds. A recent study discovered a sharp increase in childhood obesity in China. I asked Sally Squires, the creator of the blog Lean Plate Club, for her assessment of these findings.
It's very much a wake-up call, and I think what we're seeing China in all of its economic, in all the things that are happening to it economically and how, all those great things, the downside is we're seeing them start to have the same problems that all the Western countries have, and that includes childhood obesity. And childhood obesity is such a big problem because we used to think that if kids were a little overweight as children, that they'd simply grow out of it. But we know that that's not the case. So some of the more recent studies that have been done in China by a combination of Chinese and US scientists show that 80% of kids who are overweight as children end up being also overweight as adults.
One of the things you see when you go to China is everybody, from kids on up, they have the devices in their hand. I mean, I remember, and I'm sure you probably fall into this category too, as kids, the parents would say, the TV's off, you're going outside to play. But now there's like so many devices. You can sit there, you can drink your fizzy drink, you can eat like bad food, and it's sedentary.
Yes.
That's a problem, isn't it?
That's a huge problem. And we see, so this is the other shift we've seen in China. So if you go back 40 years ago, less than 20% of the population lived in urban areas. Now, more than 50% live in urban areas. And that means that they're not getting as much physical activity. Food is much more available in a variety of ways, and it's not necessarily the best food that we'd like people to eat. So that's where things start to go off the rails.
One of the things that you see with a Western lifestyle, which in many cases this is what's happened, they've adapted this Western lifestyle. You look and you trace it as you did. You start out obese as a child, you're obese as an adult. I mean, there are these lingering health issues, cardiovascular, diabetes.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about the red flags out there.
Yeah, so this is why everybody's really concerned. And I wrote a book called The Stoplight Diet for Children in 1988, which is when we were starting to see the childhood obesity problem in the US, and that's only, unfortunately, gotten worse. What we see is that with increased weight, there's an increased risk of lots of diseases. We call them non-communicable diseases. So it's type 2 diabetes, it's premature heart disease, it's elevated blood pressure, it's some types of cancer that are linked to being overweight. And we're also seeing fatty liver disease, which is a condition that we never used to see in kids, and now is very prevalent. And it's mostly prevalent in those kids who are way too much. They're obese and overweight.
So I guess the final question should be, how do you put the brakes on this? I mean, what can you do? Is it education? What's the answer?
Well, so the Chinese government is actually addressing this in a very big way. So it's got to be a concerted effort. It has to be both a public-private partnership. But the Chinese government has really stepped up. They have something called Take 10. So this is getting 10 minutes a day of exercise. They've really focused on the urban areas because we know that the kids who are at greatest risk are boys. They're children 10 to 13, people who live in urban areas, because this urbanization has changed the way that Chinese people live, work, and eat. And there is an effort to try to help them have less fast food, which goes more according to the West diet. So that's too much added sugar, too much, added salt, all the things that we shouldn't have, and less of the, vegetables and fruit. One of the other things that the Chinese government is able to do, because they can regulate prices of food, they've been able to keep stable prices for rice, unbleached flour, apples, lean pork, foods that are very popular, and that also helps to kind of switch people to more the way they should eat.
Fascinating. Sally, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.